I'm your host, Chris Bogue, and this is my show on LinkedIn Live where I have conversations with cool people who will help you work more creatively. Today, please welcome to the show Travis Tyler. Travis, say hello to the audience and let them know where they can find you.
Howdy, folks. Travis Tyler. You can find me at LinkedIn, Travis Scott Tyler. You can also find me on all of your favorite streaming devices. I have a podcast that I'll get into a little bit later.
Excellent. Yeah, that's Travis. And if you're unfamiliar with me, I am your host, Chris Bogue. This is where I have conversations about different aspects of business and creativity. And if you want to find me, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way to find me. Look up Chris Bogue and ring my bell. I post new content all the time, new sketch comedy, new podcast episodes. You can listen to all old episodes of this show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also find me on Twitter at Chris Sells Soul. So welcome to the show. We're going to be talking about improv and content creation today. Before we get into it here with Travis, hello to everyone in the comments. I see we got Cole, we got Mary, we have Wendy. Hello, welcome everybody. If you're here today, please leave a comment so I know that you're here. You can comment yes and that lets us know that you're here. You can comment where you're posting from tonight. This is going to be a conversation about improv and how to make great professional content. So if you've got any questions about improv or comedy or marketing or sales or B2B or podcasting, leave them in the comments and we might just answer it during the show. So hello, everybody. And without further ado, Travis. Hello.
Hey, Chris. Good to be
Hey,
here.
man.
Thanks so much for having me on your show. Big fan of everything you do. And when you came on my show last November, came down to Tampa Bay, Florida, we filmed an amazing podcast episode together. And I just, I saw you in a new light, man. I've been following you for a while, but I feel like we really became friends then. It was cool.
Yeah, it was surreal meeting you. And, you know, the reason why you're on the show today, and for anybody who in the audience who doesn't know, actually, this is a great question for the audience. Audience, can you weigh in if you've ever taken improv classes, if you've ever done improv, if you've done a workshop, if you've done an open mic, leave a comment and let us know if you've ever tried doing improv before. But Travis and I both met. We were LinkedIn content creators who became aware of each other. And improv is this funny thing where there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's a lot of different schools of improv. I learned at Chicago's Second City. There's also the Groundlings in LA. There was the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater in New York. There are all these different approaches. But once you've done it, you can kind of play with anybody. And it's this weird thing where I started going out on LinkedIn and doing improv. And I just started finding the other people who did it too. So this whole first half of the episode is about improv. Travis, can you tell us, how did you get into improv? When did you start and how did that happen?
I started improv in 2017, I believe. I ran into a buddy of mine from college, and I had been following him on Instagram. We were at an alumni event. I said, "What have you been up to? I've been seeing you on Instagram. It looks like you're doing so much cool stuff like comedy and music, and I'm just so envious of you." And he's like, "Well, you don't have to be envious. I mean, you can join if you would like to." And I was like, "No, I can't do that stuff. That's not for me." And it was coming from a place of fear. It was coming from a place of a lack of confidence in myself. And he said, "No, really, let's talk about it. I've seen, we've had classes together. I think you're a funny guy." And I was always surprised you never tried out for the comedy troupe at our college. And he's like, "Look, I got an offer for you. Every Saturday we have a drop-in class. It's pay what you want. If you don't like it, you never have to do it again. But come by. I think you'll love it and give it a shot." That was my first kind of like introduction to it, because I had to have somebody kind of like really pull me and drag me into it. And I loved it. Absolutely. He was right. I ended up taking 3 years worth of classes there where I worked my way progressively through different levels and stages, and eventually graduated from their program at my local theater here, auditioned and joined a house team through that local theater, and then branched off and started doing musical improv, which has been really fun as well. And I just continue to do that in my own work now at PandaDoc with a business comedy podcast, with community building and social media efforts. So it's kind of come full circle.
It's interesting. So you had a friend pull you in. I had the exact opposite experience. I learned about improv by watching Whose Line Is It Anyway on TV. And I was Boy Scout when I was little. So when I was in 6th grade, we would just start. I would just take my friends and we would just play the games that we saw on Whose Line Is It Anyway, you know? Then I formed another group when I was in high school. And then I went to college. I studied it in college. Then I went after college, developed my own group, started doing stuff at the theaters, started writing and directing sketch comedy. But yeah, it's this weird thing because you go from this transition to like, I could never do that. Look at how amazing everybody is on the spot. And then all of a sudden you're that person who's up there getting the joke. So everybody, I've got some interesting questions here. So I'm just going to show some of the comments here. So we got Will Aiken is here, friend of the show. David's got some interesting commentary too. My brother did stand up at NYNC, went broke. Yeah, it turns out it's actually not a big money maker unless you also learn the make money in B2B SaaS part in addition to it. But the skills are pretty useful on their own. Mary Baker, we can get into the different approaches later in the show. She learned the Upright Citizens Brigade approach, which I have a lot of love for. And yeah, you know, I saw somebody say my life is improv. Courtney says my life is improv. And I do believe I'm one of those weirdos who believes that life is an improvisation. But I want to hear from you, Travis. How would you define improv if you had to explain it to somebody who had never done it?
How would I explain it to somebody who's never done it? It's the most cringe form of comedy there is. It's like the redheaded stepchild of comedy. We get shit on a lot by stand-ups, and I got teased a lot about how, you know, dorky improv is, and I loved it, man. I knew that it was in its own way very silly, and for a lot of people who are, you know, I think the people that were calling it cringe probably needed improv the most in their life, which I think is the irony of there. There were lots of sketches I would see like on TikTok when it first rolled out, making fun of improv and how dorky improvisers are. And I was like, hey, those are me and my friends. Be nice to us.
Let me pull you back here because I think the audience does need a definition. So I'm gonna define it for the audience just in case. So improv, quite simply, is just a performance that has no script, and it's easy to overcomplicate it. But the gist of it is a state of openness. It is you are playing in the moment, you are listening fully, and basically the only rule of improv is yes and. And if anybody in the audience has not ever heard of yes and before, yes and is the rule that basically says whatever your partner says, you have to accept as true. You can't deny your partner. If somebody says, hey, you know, here we are on Mars, you're on Mars. You know, you don't get to shoot them down. You have to build off of what the last person said. And yeah, that it is not about going for jokes. It is about building a scene in the moment. So Sandy Severs says, so I'm living it. Yes, you are. If you are actually in the moment, if you are actually listening and engaging with someone, that is improvisation. And that's why improv skills has so much overlap with sales skills, because it's an open scene. You can't premeditate exactly the way it's going to go, but you have to stay engaged. And, you know, I'm trying to teach LinkedIn about improv, and it's difficult. Because it is so ill-defined. But yeah, maybe we can make it a little bit more specific for the audience by talking about like, what are some examples of games that you played or exercises that you did? Maybe something the audience will recognize, or maybe something you need to explain to them. Can you give us a couple of examples of like what you were doing in an improv show or in an improv scene?
Yeah. So where I studied improv was really broken up into like two different categories. You had long form improv and you had short form improv. And short form improv might be what some folks are more familiar with. You mentioned a very popular show that I also grew up on, Whose Line Is It Anyway? that was more of a short form style of improv where you're playing games, you bring the audience in on the rules of the game, and those are short-lived kind of scenarios and scenes within a certain parameters of rules. I'll give you an example of one that was one of my favorites to play, which is called Pan Left. It involved 4 people on stage, and it was 2 people up front and then 2 people at back. And basically, you had a 5th improviser who was kind of on the bell and would ding the bell and yell out "Pan left," just like that, Chris. And that scene would then shift everybody to the left. There you go. Look at you improvising with our restream tool. And then a new scene would begin with those characters, and each pairing had a different theme, a different scene, a different set of characters with different motives. Who, it was like flipping a channel changer, and each time you flipped it, you got a whole new show you were watching. And it was a lot of fun to have to think on your feet, and the host of the show would then mess around. Once the scenes were all 4 scenes were established with each different pair, you were also then in a situation where the host would mess with you and make you pan left really quickly and give you like 3 seconds in the spotlight, and then ding, then the next ding, then the next one. You never knew which one was going to come up, and the actors had to remember which scene was with which partner and where they had left off. And it built a lot of tension and created a lot of humor.
So you were more of a short form guy then than a long form guy?
I was. That's the majority of the house group that I performed with for about 2 years. That was the majority of what we did, but I did study long form improv as kind of like the basis and the foundation, and got into the games actually surprisingly afterwards.
See, this is an interesting thing because this is something about myself that I forget. And for the audience, if you don't know this at home, there is sometimes bad blood between short form improv and long form improv. Mm-hmm. Long form improv is like you get one word and you just go for like 20 to 40 minutes and you just make up everything on the spot. A lot of the short form people think long form improv is pretentious and boring. And a lot of the long form people think short form improv is bullshit. And it's just like easy, silly game. Yeah, it's gimmicky.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I come from a style of training. I was in college. We won the national improv championships. And it was because we had this kind of weird hybrid style. And it was the same thing when I was in the city, where we would do long form improv. I did full length musicals. I did improvised sitcoms. I did improvised dramatic plays. I did all these long form things, but our actual shows were a hybrid, where it was like half the show was short form, then we would do a long form. But even in the long form, we would stop and like introduce short form games. And like we had this very experimental kind of like throw whatever at the wall and see what happens kind of a style.
For sure.
And we would bring in like dancers. Like my university had a university circus, and we would just kind of mix art forms and throw other people in just to see what happens. And it has kind of given me this kind of anything goes style towards business too, where I don't really differentiate that differently between an email versus content versus a sales meeting versus I'm just thinking of like, how can I get in front of somebody, and like, here's 50 different tools I could potentially use, use the smartest one possible. So, can you tell me a little bit about like how it changed you? What did you start doing differently? How did you start seeing life differently once you learned yes and how to improvise on stage?
I think one of the best things about taking improv classes and learning the mechanics of it and the philosophies of it is it helped me overcome embarrassment, a fear of embarrassment that I was holding on to for pretty much my entire life. I had a lot of social anxiety. I was afraid of what people thought of me. I was afraid of looking silly, of being made fun of, and feeling the shame that comes along with that. And as a kid, I loved fantasy play. I loved making up worlds in my backyard, and just coming up with different scenarios that I would dream up of. And somewhere along the way, middle school, high school, I built up a lot of, I just kind of like forgot how to be silly. I forgot how to have fun, and just let go and make weird noises and do whatever publicly. And improv allowed me to tap back into that. And I've got a great quote here. I was reading this article on how Colbert got over embarrassment. And they talk about the fear of embarrassment often comes from a wanting of approval. And so that was true. I just wanted approval, right? When you think about like middle school and high school, you want to fit in. You want to be the same. You don't want to get ostracized and made fun of and have no friends, and just everybody wants to be the same. And I forgot who I was talking with this about, but I was like, is the reason I bought and one basketball shorts. I don't really like basketball, but I wanted to fit in.
You know what though? This is so interesting too, because I had a parallel experience. Also, everybody, welcome to everybody who just joined in. We got Mary, we got Kelsey, we got Denise, James, Ken. Love to see you all here. We're talking about embarrassment. How do you get over yourself? One of my biggest weaknesses as an improviser for most of my 20s was I felt like I needed to be better than the scene. I grew up and I was a 90s kid, and I still have trouble shutting off my commentary sometimes. I grew up on Mystery Science Theater 3000 and Beavis and Butthead. And, the 90s were just a very sarcastic time where it was like, oh, look at all these dweebs who think they're cool. We're going to sit here and make fun of them. And the more I can really emotionally throw myself into a scene with pure honesty, the funnier it is, and when I was a younger improviser, I was always trying to show the audience that I was really clever, and nothing ever came out as clever as I wanted it to. And, over the past few years, I've been making a lot of video content. Chris Farley was my hero growing up, and I've just watched so many of his sketches again. And I realized that the vulnerability was what was funny.
Yep.
The fact that he was this really sweet person who is really vulnerable and just really nice and really wanted everyone to like him. When you would juxtapose that with just his insane, he would act like a lunatic and scream and fall through tables and stuff. That duality was what the audience thought was funny. And as I've gotten older, I've become less sarcastic, and I'm more put myself into situations where I can be a real person. And in the case of B2B SaaS, a real person who's being heartbroken and just, swatted down and disrespected by this working world we live in. And it's way funnier. And when I was doing sketch, I used to cast actors instead of comedians, because you really need to get down to the reality of it. And yeah, some people they can't put their ego aside enough to do that. It's too scary for them.
Yeah, and most of the people that were in my improv classes were aspiring actors, and their acting coaches instructed them, go do improv because you're taking yourself too seriously, and there's a lot of loosening up that you need to do. I was reading this article that I found. It's an old one. I wanted to share it with you. They were talking, it's Jimmy Carrane and Matt Havode. I hadn't heard of them, but the article was inspiration they got from one of their early improv teachers, Del Close, who's like very, very famous.
Bill Murray's Del Close is the man who taught Bill Murray and John Belushi improv. If anybody at home doesn't know, he was like the godfather of long form improv. He really took it from, no, this isn't a theater exercise. This is a theater production. We're doing this in front of an audience. Sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to fill in.
You're good. Thanks. I needed that context. That helps frame it for folks who are like, who's Del Close? Jim Belushi, Bill Murray. And you're like, oh, okay. I think I'm familiar with those people. But it says, I learned that when I feel shame, I have taken a risk. I have pushed myself and my art in a very honest direction outside of my comfort zone. Shame is like fear. It's not good or bad. It's simply an emotion. If you felt it on stage, use it as a signal that you're being vulnerable and heading in the right direction. So if you're going to follow fear, you might as well embrace the shame too. Know that you didn't do anything wrong, and actually you did something spectacular. So I wanted to share that with you. Conversations you and I have had leading up to this really made me think about that vulnerability. My wife likes to tell me when she's seen me perform, my funniest scenes are not when I think I'm being funny. My funniest scenes are usually when I'm not even trying to be funny.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is a good segue into our next segment, Gimme Gimme. Travis, are you ready for Gimme Gimme?
I'm ready for Gimme Gimme.
Okay, so if anybody doesn't know, on this show from time to time, we like to take a minute to really explore the reason why LinkedIn exists. So some people think LinkedIn exists to make friends. Some think it exists to give helpful advice. But we all know that LinkedIn actually exists for shameless self promotion. We're all here to get jobs, get work, get hired. And this is the part of the show where my guests and I like to get into character and ask the audience for exactly what we want from them. So, Travis, are you ready for Gimme Gimme?
I'm ready, Chris.
Here we go. Hello, Boss Bogue here. Gimme Gimme. Today's episode is sponsored by... Okay, well, we don't have any sponsors today because I'm in the middle of working out my new packages for this year, and it's going to be fantastic. So if you'd like to sponsor Chris Sells' show this year, I've got some very exciting information for you. But first, Travis, my audience is here. Tell them what you want.
Boss Bogue, thanks so much. I really want one thing, and that one thing is I want you to open your mobile device, and wherever you get your music, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Apple Music, I would like you to search for the Customer Engagement Lab. It is a business comedy podcast that I pour my blood, sweat, and panda tears into on a bi-weekly and monthly basis. I hope that you will enjoy it. Coming out in just about a month or two is an episode I did with Chris Bogue, who's not currently here. And I would just think that you get a lot out of it. We talk about sales, marketing, customer success, and I bring in entrepreneurs. I bring in professors. I bring in barbers. I bring in people who have started their own coffee businesses. It's a lot of fun. It's something that I would just gimme. Please subscribe. Please listen to it.
Yeah, check it out. It's funny. He's a panda, right? So he doesn't mate. What's he going to do? He sits around, he entertains you, and he helps you get better at business. Which reminds me, gimme. Hey there, folks. I don't know if you've taken a look at the landscape out there on LinkedIn right now, but it is dog shit. You understand me? I don't know what you sales leaders out there are thinking, but your job is to make money and to inspire confidence in your team. And I don't see any of that out there right now. I see you all crying in your beer about the economy. Why am I having all the fun out here? Why are the only other people out there having fun Travis Tyler and Lavender, who's apparently comprised of like 90% guests from my live stream? It's because we know how to have fun. And that's what makes money in 2023. So if you're sitting there wondering about how you're going to make money this year, maybe you should pony up and pay for some coaching. I have all sorts of coaching packages. I'm launching a new cohort in March. I also have a course which we'll be learning about in a moment, or even better, you can bring me in to train your company. That's right, folks. This is the promised land. It's not that hard to put on a panda suit or a tie and scream at your audience. And guess what? This makes a surprisingly large amount of money. So if you want to get out there and make mercifully short video content for social media, or if you want to get on video and make some vidyards that aren't fucking garbage, because I've seen your vidyards and they're bad, reach out to Chris Bogue. I will train you. We will have fun. We will go out there and stomp the competition and make them angry that their stuff is so lame. And you have the opportunity to be a sponsor of this show. So I'm going to be rolling out my packages this year. We have paid sponsorship opportunities available. And let me tell you, I am good to my sponsors. Right? You can be featured in a show, or you could get the full Chris Bogue treatment, which means you're going to get in comedy sketches. I will shout you out on LinkedIn, and I will make sure that your content gets seen, because it's not about seeing once, it's about becoming part of the conversation. And if you look what's winning on LinkedIn right now, it's stuff that looks like what Chris Bogue is doing. So get out there, shoot me a DM, go to chrisbogue.io, email me, flag me down, do something, but buy my stuff. Gimme. Travis, you got anything else?
Buy his stuff. Just buy it. Just whatever he says, do it.
This has been Gimme Gimme. Iggy, roll the tape.
Hello?
Is this Mr. Sherber?
It sure is. What can I help you with, brother?
Hello. You were not expecting this call. Do you have 17 seconds to
Hang
learn
on a
about
second.
mercifully short?
Is this a cold call?
I don't know.
You. Never call this number again.
Oh no! Another unsuccessful cold call. You probably don't have time to fuck off.
I got a quota to hit.
Are you spending hours every week cold calling and cold emailing but not seeing results?
There's gotta be a better way.
Introducing the complete guide to selling on video. Whether you're new to sales or a President's Club member, this fast and fun course will teach you to efficiently create short, customized videos that get results. The complete guide to selling on video is not sold in stores. Visit chrisbogue.io and use promo code GimmeGimme to take $50 off while supplies last. Don't delay. Get noticed today.
And we're back. So, Travis, thanks for doing Gimme Gimme.
Oh, we're back. Yeah, we're
Hey,
back.
kids. And yeah, I think this is a good segue. Audience, if you can't see it, come on, guys. I'm making bad videos are in. Make it actionable. Oh, cost range. Oh, yeah. Well, someone wants to know the cost range. Yeah, I'll tell you. So the course is $250. It's $50 off with the promo that you saw. Coaching packages, they range anywhere from like a few $1,000s to like upwards of 15 or 20,000, depending on what you're doing. And then, yeah, for the sponsorship package, there's going to be mini sponsorships, which are going to be a few $100s, or like long-term sponsorships. So like a 3-month plan where you're going to be paying a certain amount of $1,000, but you're going to be featured in every single live stream episode. You're going to get your logo displayed. You're going to get ad copy read in Gimme Gimme and announced at the top of the show. And I'll also plug you throughout the month. So yeah, and I also can't see who it is. It just says LinkedIn user. So I apologize. I can't see your name right now. But yeah, this has taken us to the second half of the show, because if you haven't noticed, we don't just do improv. We use it as part of our job. It's not easy to go out here every single week and come up with new stuff, and improv gives us the tools to do that. So Travis, could you take us a little bit more into like, what is your job at PandaDoc? What role does improv play in what you do? And take us through the journey of like where you've started and kind of what you do now.
Yeah, so I've been in marketing for close to 8 years, and the first half of that career was doing a lot of grunt work. I was just a marketing generalist, trying to make a name for myself, learn all the things I thought a marketer should learn. Everything from events, email marketing, website content management, digital design and graphic design and content creation. And eventually I landed a job at PandaDoc as just a blog writer and an ebook writer. And I had about 6 months into that job, I did a really long ebook with HubSpot and PandaDoc together. And we got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of leads and downloads from that. And then we tried to do it again, and it wasn't nearly as successful. And I had a VP of marketing who was like, hey, so your superpower is not writing. And I was like, okay, that's what I was hired for. And he was like, yeah. I want you to do video. You ever done video? And I was like, no. And he's like, well, I think you're a pretty funny guy. So let's see what you can do. And I was like, okay, well, I do some improv comedy, as a hobby on weeknights and weekends. And he's like, great. You can have some fun with it. And I started out by just recording videos on my phone. He's like, let's start with our most downloaded and visited blog articles, like highest traffic pages. And then I want you to create 3 to 5 minute video recaps of those blog articles. And let's see if it improves visibility on search engines, and let's see if it improves conversions. And it slowly started to pick up a little bit of traction. The algorithms liked it, and the search engines liked it. And my team internally was like, you're great on camera. And I was like, thanks, I guess. I don't know. And they're like, don't you get nervous? Isn't this hard for you? I was like, no, actually, I really am finding I enjoy it. And I realized I was hitting what some people call flow state. And I just kind of loved so much what I was doing that I was equal parts challenged and rewarded in creating video content. And I always had to put a fun spin on it. The name of the company is PandaDoc. It's not, a real serious name. And I wanted to try to inject some fun into the brand. And we started a business comedy podcast that gets about 1,000 downloads per episode at this point. We've been doing that for 2 years, and it all just kind of evolved from there.
That's so interesting. It's interesting, one, that just like pandas drew you to do it too, because I've got this weird theme throughout my life where pandas keep coming up as a comic device. I wrote a whole sketch show that took place in the future at Second City, and it was this bizarre future where there was like 300 different political parties because the U.S. had been through a couple civil wars, and Teddy Roosevelt's party, the Bull Moose Party, was back, but they were like crazy environmentalist. And the joke was that they were anti-panda because pandas take up so much resources, and they take it away from other more endangered species. And he had to pander his way through the primaries to get elected. So he accidentally got elected by promising to murder a panda on live TV with a hammer. And that was the president's story of like having to deliver on this promise. And then the joke was he did it. He killed the panda on live TV, and everyone was just horrified. And they're like, "Why did you do that?" And he's like, You literally demanded that I do it. And they're like, that was a month ago. We're idiots. Like, why did you listen to us? This made us so sad. And then he got impeached. But yeah.
I love that story because it reminds me of something I get asked a lot, especially in the corporate world, which is, how does your brain work that way? How do you think of these things? Like, why? How do you get away with it as well, is like another thing that I get asked a lot.
Okay, that's an interesting question. So I'll say a couple things. One, you used the word flow state earlier. That makes me think of Viola Spolin. So if anybody knows Viola Spolin, she is like the mother of improv. She's the one who came up with a lot of the improv games we play today. Her son was Paul Sills, who went on to found the Second City. But if you've ever read Viola Spolin's books, she talks a lot about intuition. And she says what improv is you're putting somebody into a state where they have to rely on their intuition. You know, they're not allowed to preconceive what's going to happen. And so like you were saying, if you're feeling shame on stage, you got to just use it, you know, because like your character is ashamed of something. And like, that's actually really interesting to watch a character grapple with that, you know? So when you ask, how does my mind work like this? That show, you know, we basically started by like just taking inventory of all the problems in society, every single thing that people fight about on the news. And we're like, what if all of this was fixed? Okay, there's only 2 parties. Everyone wants 1 million parties. Great. Now there's 1 million parties. There's so many you don't know what to do. The presidency is too important. It's only 4 years. Okay, now they're going to pick a new president every month. You know, people can't figure out the right religion. Well, Jesus just came back and we're all just following. He's just here now. And like, that's the religion. He wins.
God, that would be a really good scene.
And then we're just going to see what happened. What happened was everybody got sick of him. Jesus came back and everybody was cool with it. And then he kind of got flustered and lost steam. So he went back into carpentry and he just started building houses because he just couldn't take the pressure anymore. But again, the reason why we could get away with it is because there's an internal logic that's consistent. It's not randomness. We really created the world first and then said what would happen next. And it's kind of like how if anybody's ever watched like Breaking Bad or one of these long form television shows, the writers will say that their creative process is they create this ridiculous situation where they don't know how the character is going to get out of it. And then they have to logically walk through the character's thought process and say, what would they do next? So it's like, this goes back to that kind of sometimes cringy authenticity. But yeah, you really got to buy into the reality. Even though it's all fake, you have to buy into the stakes of the scene, because if there's emotional stakes, that's what's going to make the raunchy stuff, the funny stuff, that's what's going to make it punch harder. Again, it's that duality, it's the thing you recognize, the thing you're anchored to, and then the absurdity bounces off of it.
Yeah, the concept that I wanted to share with the audience too about that just gets hammered into you in improv is crafting and creating your base reality. So when you're watching a, let's say, two-person scene as an audience member, improviser asks for a suggestion from the audience. What is a chore that you don't like doing on the weekends, but that you have to do anyway? Someone says scrubbing the toilet. Somebody else says raking leaves. Okay. When you and your partner take a beat to think like, all right, the suggestion was raking leaves. That's the one we went with. The two of you have to use your intuition and your observation and your listening skills to create a reality with no props, with no backdrop, no CGI, and you have to bring everyone into it and make it believable. And one of the biggest lessons I learned about creating base reality is commitment. And it really clicked with me when I took my first musical improv class. I felt like I had kind of mastered short form improv, and I was still somewhat shy about singing. I just felt like I didn't have a great singing voice. I sometimes felt like I was off key. I had a hard time keeping up with the beat sometimes. And there was a breakthrough moment for me in musical improv when I just said, fuck it and commit. And like the instructor forced me to redo scenes until I fully committed. Like was like, nope, try it again. Nope, try it again. Nope, try it again. You're not committing. You're holding back. You're holding back. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. And it was just like, and I just had to keep singing louder and with more of my voice and with more heart and passion and breath until everyone was like, there it is. He's not holding anything back anymore. And so I think that's really valuable in the corporate world, because when you go half in on a joke, it doesn't land. And people are afraid, especially on LinkedIn in the corporate world, to get fired from their job, to say something that gets them canceled, to get in trouble, to get embarrassed, right? There's high stakes here. We're talking about the way I bring food on the table, and so I get that. But that's in my opinion, what is so invaluable about improv is learning to commit to create this base reality for you and your audience.
Yeah, commitment. Another way I've heard it put, Mick Napier, who is very respected Chicago sketch comedy director, directed some of the greatest Second City shows of all time, wrote a fantastic book that I recommend called Improvise. Anybody pick up Improvise by Mick Napier, hugely influential book on my style. But he's interesting because Del Close wrote the first big improv book that I read, which was Truth in Comedy. And Truth in Comedy explains it's all about your partner. It's not about you. You got to support your partner. You got to make your partner look good. You got to honor your partner's decisions. Mick Napier's philosophy is the strongest gift you can give to another person is a strong point of view. And I take this into the business world too, but you used your example of like scrubbing a toilet. If I'm scrubbing that scene and the lights come up and I'm going, I'm just like grunt out and I'm pissed, that's a gift. The way I'm doing it, the facial everything I'm doing, I've given my partners something they can play off of. Or if I'm sitting there and I'm whistling, I'm like, do, 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 do. And I'm, just enjoying myself, having a good old time scrubbing toilets. It's like, why does this guy love scrubbing toilets so much? What's his deal? And like, it doesn't matter. They're complete opposite points of view. But if you're just sitting there kind of giving your partner like generic guy, that's not really an interesting scene. And it's like, it doesn't really matter. I was always taught when your partner makes an initiation, you can either lean into it or you can lean away from it. But you have to go like all in on your point of view. And this is a thing I preach about to marketers, because I don't hear this word enough from them. But it's like, yeah, I want to hear about your point of view. Don't tell me just how much money you think you can make me, because everybody's different. And I'm just gonna, when people tell me they're gonna make, you're gonna make 6 figures a month or whatever, I'm just like, how would you know that? But if somebody has the same point of view as me, if I see a really smart piece of content and I'm like, I agree with where they're coming from, that is powerful. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I think there was another concept that I wanted to talk about from improv that I think can relate to marketing, and it's on the tip of my tongue. Let me see if I can come back to it.
Yeah,
Maybe
well,
Roland's
one other one that I wanted to bring up, just because somebody brought in here, who was talking about the Upright Citizens Brigade. So my apologies, I can't find who said it in the comments, but the Upright Citizens Brigade approach to improv is to ask, if this is true, then what else is true?
If this is true, what else is? That's exactly. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good framework for me. For me, another thing about improv too is just really listening. One thing you learn is, like, you don't even really have to be that funny. You have to be specific. So if I'm doing like a improv set and we're doing a game like Day in the Life, which is where you bring an audience member on stage, you interview them about their day, and then you recreate their day. The fun of it is just prodding them for like little details, and they'll be like, oh, then I got into the car. You'd be like, were you listening to music? Like, what were you listening to? Weezer? It's like, okay. And then later on, when someone's in the car, someone on the side starts going, once with these homies, dissing my girl. And it's 5 minutes later in the show, but the audience remembers, oh, that's right, 'cause she was listening to Weezer. And it's like, the more you pick up on the little details, the more you fill out the reality. And like, this is the same thing in business too. This is if you're in a sales call, the strongest thing you can do is listen closely to all the little details and get very curious when something sticks out, because and maybe you've got some thoughts on, if this is true, then what else is true. But yeah, I find it's interesting, because if you pick these little details that they weren't expecting to expand on, they'll surprise themselves. You'll sometimes get to a place that surprises both of you.
One of the things I quickly learned, especially in my like beginning level improv classes, was there were a few people, usually just one or two, who steamrolled everybody else on stage, and they would talk over their fellow improvisers. They wouldn't listen, and it was so glaringly obvious to anyone in the audience that they weren't listening. And that's when it became cringe. That's when it was like, oh gosh, like that's the biggest no that you can make, is not to just say no to your fellow improviser and whatever gift they offered you, whatever suggestion, whatever character they started to develop or scene work they started to create, is if you just choose to completely ignore it. So if you told me in a scene, hey, we're at Dick's Sporting Goods looking for a new pickleball set. And then all of a sudden, I didn't listen to that. And I'm like, boy, I'm sure am glad we're at this Exxon Mobil. The beef jerky tastes great. It's like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah, now you kind of got to like smash those ideas together, where it's like, okay, here's
what
the
are
pick.
you doing?
Oh, look, they sell pickleball sets here. I didn't know that. It's a good call. This is an interesting question that Mary threw in. Like, what if jumping off a ledge or a marriage proposal, accept reality even if they say no? And this is kind of a complicated one, because sometimes you can say yes by saying no. So an example would be like, there was a scene that was described, I think, in either Truth and Comedy or Improvise, where it was like a father, he was like sitting down or whatever, and then like his kid was like just came like crawling on the floor, and he goes, "Father, please feed me." And the father goes, "No, get back in your cage." That's a yes. He was, like, the son had established that like this was a bad situation where he was pleading for his life, you know. But honestly, and you know, this kind of comes together for like you know, the marriage proposal and stuff like this. People go too far in improv all the time. And there's if you betray your fellow improviser's trust, that's a really deadly thing, you know.
Yeah.
So we always had rules, especially at open mics. If you ever run an improv open mic and you haven't before, tell the audience explicitly you are not allowed to lift people up. For some reason, every improv mic, especially if it's a tiny woman, people think they can just pick her up. That is the instant way to kill trust. You do not do that.
Yeah.
And maybe we can get into this too, because this is a really hard thing for people to learn. So I have this thing about ensembles, and all the great comedians you see who came from Second City, or they're great stand-ups, or they're great comedy writers, they usually come in groups, right? So like some of my heroes, Chris Farley, Conan O'Brien, Bob Odenkirk, Stephen Colbert, Robert Smigel, all these guys were in all sorts of writers' rooms together for years. You know, Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, the reason why they do all these things together to this day is because they learned improv together in Chicago. You know, the Reno 911 crew, all those actors, they're all improvisers.
So good.
They're amazing, and they still do work together because that's who they learned to play with. Same for the Wet Hot American Summer crew.
Yep.
You know, the Stella crew, Michael Showalter, and all those people. They were in an environment where they could learn with people they trusted. So, Travis, I assume because you were doing stuff with a local group, was this part of your story? Was learning to find your trust in a larger group?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We had a situation in one of my classes, because a class would also becomes you were meeting once a week for 3 hours for 12 weeks straight, just like a college class for like a whole semester. And so you built a lot of trust over the course of those 12 weeks with that cohort that you were with. And I remember distinctly a story where somebody broke that trust. And it involved a woman who felt uncomfortably touched and put into a scene that she was like, here I am again, where you are like sexualizing my character. And it was a big learning moment. It was super uncomfortable, but it was the instructors handled it unbelievably well. And we were lucky enough to have both a male and female instructor at that time. So we had two of them, and we just kind of had like a very like step-by-step breakdown of like why this is a no-no, you know, and listening to like what the guy intended, what his intentions were. He apologized. He was embarrassed. I think he ended up dropping out of the program like quickly after that. But I still improvise with the woman to this day. And it was so good for her to speak up and for her to say something, because I like learned what her boundaries are. Just like you said, like, don't lift up the small female improviser. Like, don't need to do that.
You know what? It's interesting you bring that up too, because I had a similar turning point in improv. I was in college. There was many more men in the group than there was women, and I was doing an improvised play. Maybe it was an improvised sitcom. I don't remember. I think it was an improvised play, and there was one woman in the show, Annie Ricks, talented Chicago sketch comedian actress. So she goes there. We're on the first day of rehearsal. It's all men and Annie. And Annie stands up and she goes, "Hey, I just want to let everybody know I'm really excited to be working on this. And I am not going to play anybody's girlfriend, and I'm not going to play anybody's wife. I don't want to be pigeonholed. You guys get to play all the crazy, stupid characters you want. And I want to play crazy, stupid characters too. So please don't make me play your girlfriend every night in this awesome play that we're going to get to do. If there has to be a girlfriend in the story, why don't you play the girlfriend?
Exactly.
Why don't you play the wife? Wouldn't that be funny if Chris Bogue was the wife for the whole show?
Yeah.
But please respect that I am not going to be playing those roles because it's too easy for me to only play those roles.
Correct.
Yep. And I thought about it and I'm like, you know what? if she didn't say something, I might have accidentally done that to her.
Yeah.
I would have made her like generic wife character.
Yeah.
When really, like, Annie plays stupid, uncomfortable, oddball characters. And
Mhm.
all the stuff she came out as in the show was so funny. And the plots weren't these cliche Hollywood rom-com type stories. It was a lot more interesting for her to be like an old lady with dementia who's like stealing money from the organization than to be like somebody's lame wife, you know? But again, that doesn't just happen. We had to create a situation where like we were working on this very hard, we were open to each other, and we were actually willing to take that feedback and not get offended by it, you know? And I think a lot of people today, just somebody gets hurt by something they said, and the first thing they can do is just be like, oh, well, it couldn't be that I made something that was kind of shitty, you know? Like, there's like no introspection. And like, I've actually learned from doing comedy that like, yeah, you know what? Sometimes you're going to cross a line. Sometimes the thing that you think is really funny is not as funny as you think.
Mhm.
And whether it's an audience not laughing when you expected them to laugh, or a fellow cast member saying, please don't treat me like this. Please don't make jokes like this. I don't appreciate that. And I feel disrespected when you do this. If you can't respect that, there's going to be no trust in the group, and it's going to be terrible.
It comes back to listening. So if you listened to that person, you should be good. You should be golden, and you shouldn't have to worry about it anymore. And it's so great that she was so transparent and direct with the request and with the line in the sand. I had a similar situation where one of my improvisers on my team was African American, and he was like, no cop scenes, no scenes where I'm a prisoner, I'm a guy getting pulled over, no scenes with cops. It's just really a sensitive time for me right now, and I'm not going to be okay if we do a cop scene. So I'm just letting it be known. And we were all like, cool, no problem. Thank you so much for speaking up. Because inevitably, sometimes those scenes do come up where it's like police officer and, person, and like person of authority and person, with no power. And you're just...
Yeah. So here, this is something interesting. So Mary asked, if you notice something like that, do you reference it directly, specifically like with stereotypes with race? And this is a complicated question because in satire you are you satirize the world we live in, not the world we wish we live in. And racism, police brutality, sexism, these are all topics that satirists need to be able to take head on. One is like, if you create comedy with people that are different from you, you're going to learn a lot. And I was lucky. I have been in writers' rooms where I am the only man. I have been in writers' rooms, where it's like there's like women who are running it, or it's like people who are trans, or people who are Black, people who are different from me. And there's the two sides of it. One, you bring in your edgy sketch and they're like, okay, we're going to have a little talk with you now, Chris, because you're not doing that voice anymore. That was not appreciated at all. And let me just gently explain to you why I'd like you to never do that again. But the flip side of that is you will actually discover that there are some topics that you thought was off limits that are not off limits.
That's so true.
Yeah. And the example I love giving is Key and Peele. Anybody knows Key and Peele? Very hilarious entertainers, sketch comedians, had a great show on Comedy Central for a while. Both learned at Second City. And they had this sketch about stereotypes. And the joke was they went around the room and made fun of every single stereotype. They made fun of every ethnicity. They made fun of every religion, every sexuality, they just went and hammered everybody as part of this joke about stereotypes. And after the show, a guy rolls up to them in a wheelchair. And he goes, hey, did you forget somebody? You made fun of everybody. I was sitting here waiting for you to make fun of people in wheelchairs, and you didn't do it. Do you think we couldn't handle it? You think people in wheelchairs can't take jokes? because I think you guys pulled your punches. And they're like, oh, wow, we did. we thought it was too insensitive to do a wheelchairs joke. And yeah, it's like the more you work with people who are not like you, the more you work with different ideologies, different backgrounds, races, genders, sexuality, you will realize different things you're ignorant on, but you'll also realize things where maybe you were a little paternalistic. You know, you were trying to be like a white savior who's like kind of a little too up your own ass, and they're like, no, we're going to make fun of this because this is a real thing and it's funny.
Yeah. And Mary, to answer your question and to like draw back to bringing comedy and improv comedy into business, like Chris said, sometimes, yes, like it's about working as a team. And so like both at my company at PandaDoc and on my improv troupe, I want my team members to say something directly to me. I don't want them to hold on to it and have the whole show be ruined. So a lot of times before I air something like a pre-recorded sketch, a TikTok video, it's going through just a couple few people, especially if I think I'm stretching and I'm like doing something that could ruffle a few feathers. And I want them to say something to me. And sometimes it doesn't get said until too late, and that can happen too, and you just have to address it. But like Chris said, I've learned a lot about like what's kosher and what's not kosher as a white cisgendered, heterosexual male. There's just voices I've learned the hard way of somebody telling me like, hey, don't do that voice anymore. And I'm like, gotcha. I'll do an Irish accent instead because I'm Irish. We'll do that one next time.
Yeah. Or, this is kind of like, and we're getting at the end of our time here too, but I will also say like comedy always exists in the margins. I believe firmly comedy exists in the gray area between what people feel they should do and what they actually do. So you're going to get it wrong sometimes. But like there's ways around that. And I always learned if you're ever writing a sketch show, you put your most controversial stuff near the end. I was always taught at Second City, you open with a song, which is why I always open my live stream with a song. Also, you can say more offensive things in a song than you can just talk in regular. If you want to say something really offensive, put it in a song. But yeah, if we really wanted to push the envelope, we would put that in the last act of the show once the audience had already built up some goodwill and knew that we weren't a bunch of D-bags. And this is also why Saturday Night Live always puts their most questionable stuff at the end of the show. Because you want to make sure the people who are there, the people who are like really like willing to give you the benefit of the doubt. So the long story is the more you try, the more you listen, the more trust you build, the less you think about it, the easier it gets. So Travis, I wish, go on. I was going to give you the final thought because we're at our time here, but I want to close it out here.
If you cross the line and somebody comes at you and says, hey, I didn't like that. That's okay. That doesn't mean they don't like me. That doesn't mean I'm going to get fired. A lot of the places our anxiety will take us to, this fear of embarrassment, this fear of shame, of getting in trouble. I've been told, hey, dial it back a little bit. Okay. I learned that was a line that boss at that particular time didn't want me to cross. And I appreciated the feedback. That's going into the comedy with an open mind of like, hey, this might ruffle a few feathers. Expect that you might hear somebody say they don't like it, and deal with it and own it and be like, you're right. I'm sorry I offended you. Let's try this again. Not don't ever do this again. You're stupid. You don't bring comedy into business. It's terrible. No, that's not the mindset to have.
Yeah. And I'll say too, the audience wants you to win. They want to enjoy it. They want to have a good time. The audience is on your side. When a fellow performer gives you a note like that, it's not because they're trying to hurt you. It's because you both want to do a good show. And you're just working together to come up with the best thing you could come up together as a group for your people. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Travis, one more time, if people want to find you, if they want to follow your podcast, where should they go?
They can go to YouTube, they can go to Spotify, they can go to Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, and find the Customer Engagement Lab. You can also just follow Travis Tyler on LinkedIn. I post my episodes, my clips, my teasers, my TikToks. It's all there. You can also find me at the Customer Engagement Lab on TikTok. I hope you guys are on that platform. It's where I first found Chris, and it is an amazing plethora of comedy.
Thank you. Yes. Well, you got at least one more follower because I followed it on Spotify, even though I listened on Stitcher. But want to give you one more. Once again, everybody, thank you for coming out. Thank you to all our wonderful commenters. I really enjoyed the discussion you brought to the interview tonight. Stay tuned. You can always find this episode on LinkedIn. Go find Chris Bogue. Ring the bell for new episodes and new comedy all the time. Get ready 2 weeks from now. Jen Allen is coming on for our Dark Social episode. And you all have a fantastic evening.
Thanks, Chris.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me.